Welcome to Powercoat Music. In this presentation, we're going to talk about approaching your mix, discovering what's best for your music. That is, what's the best path for your music after it's been recorded. In the world of mixdowns, the open mind is king. Everyone has their own perspective on how to approach the process, along with their own visions for how to get the job done. However, keeping an open mind and learning other theories and methods are what can make the difference between a good production and a great one. Once the music is recorded, some people struggle with what comes next. Now, that can be common because there's so many different ways to produce music. Many questions are, after the song's been recorded, what's the first thing I do? And how do I manage and process my recorded tracks? Now keep in mind that the answers to these questions will vary depending upon your goals and requirements. This presentation is not about the right or wrong way to approach your mix. It's intended to be a guide to help people who struggle with this process to make decisions that may work best for them. With this, we're going to discuss different processes and suggestions, beginning with some basic tasks that should be managed before you start mixing your music. Let's start with track analysis. A strong suggestion and a wise thing to do first is to take a written inventory of each track that includes a track description and the purpose of each track. For those unfamiliar, this is known as a track sheet. This allows you to take note of all the important factors to keep an eye on to achieve your goals, adjust your plans, and follow your progress in a precise manner. Next, you should inspect the integrity of each track for potential issues that could sound odd in the mix, and these things that you should look for include pops and clicks caused by punching in or punching out, environmental noises like dogs barking, people talking, HVAC sounds, and any distortion. At this point, you should also try to establish what the song should sound like. This relates to how important musically each track or group of tracks' role is in the song. This also leads to address the questions of what's the first thing I should do, and how do I manage and process my recorded tracks? The suggestion here is to first note and emphasize which tracks are the primary drivers of the song's arrangement, and which tracks serve to support those primary tracks. This will give you an idea of which tracks will be the lead tracks and which ones will be more in the background. Now, we'll look at establishing what I call the horizon. Before listening to all the tracks individually, it's a normal practice for many folks, including myself, to turn all the track faders up and listen to the song a few times at the very least. During this time, make sure to adjust all the levels so that you can hear each track in the mix. Don't worry about being precise at this point. After you've done this, now is a good time to build on what you want the completed production to sound like in your head. This is again what I call the horizon, and this is where the mix meets the envisioned sound in your head. This will depend on the genre, the, of course, specific type of music that you're mixing down, and this is where it's important to select an existing song that you want to sound like and use it as a reference. The goal here is not to copy that sound, but to help guide you in the direction or path to your sound. We'll move on to initializing the mix. There are two main perspectives on how to start a mix. The first is soloing all the tracks and adjusting their levels while isolated individually. Now, the premise of this process is that each track should sound as good as possible before adding them back into the context of the other tracks for final mixdown. The second is leaving all the tracks open that is unsoloed and adjusting their levels in conjunction with all the other tracks that are in context. The premise of this process is that this is how everything will sound when the mix is completed. Since both processes are logical and have stood the test of time, many experienced sound engineers use both of them. They work on solo tracks and adjust them in context with all the other tracks. With this, the final mixdown is not completed until the combined processes have addressed and managed all of the items in the musical arrangement, along with other elements such as effects. Let's look at what to handle and where to put it. Once you've initialized your mix, the suggested next step is to establish all the track's spatial considerations. This is otherwise known as panning. When vocals and instruments are positioned across a simulated stage setting in your mix, it does more than just copy the position of the musicians on stage. When different instruments come from both right and left positions, it has a strong impact on the music's composition. This can help significantly with a song's clarity and width in a complicated mix, even before adding effects like EQ. Lead vocals are usually panned center, and rhythm instruments in pop, rock, and R&B genres are often panned near center. This rule is not set in stone, but changing it could impact your sound if you're mixing down in any of these genres, so please consider your choices carefully. Achieving symmetry in a mix, which is ensuring that all of your tracks are balanced and deliver consistent strength from all directions, is the goal here. However, keep in mind that some mixes intentionally used unbalanced panning in good ways. An example are older records, but symmetry is more of a standard on today's recordings. Let's talk about creating a foundation in your mix. When dealing with R&B, pop, and rock mixes, most engineers typically start with anchoring rhythmic tracks, like drums and percussion, and then they move on to the bass track. Now, this is a logical and time-tested approach that works, but there are other ways that work too. For instance, if your song doesn't have a drum track, then it's suggested that you focus on other rhythmic elements that drive the arrangement. These include things like a bass guitar, strong synth patches, acoustic guitars, things of that nature. Let's talk about using effects. The two most common and popular effects used in mixing are compression and EQ. Whether you're mixing down your music in solo mode or in context with other tracks, these two effects are a staple. The common practice has been that in the signal chain, the EQ is used last. An example signal chain would be noise gate, compressor, EQ. This logical order is based on the fact that the compressor effect is threshold dependent. This means that it's dependent on the input level of the device connected to its input. The EQ is different because it makes adjustments to specific frequency ranges that affect the overall signal. Keep in mind that compression can have an effect on more than just the signal's dynamics. A compressed signal's tonal balance will also change noticeably. For instance, a track that's heavily compressed can sound very warm. They can also be used to make a vocal or instrument sound fatter or thicker. If a compressor is misused, this can lead to EQ used after the compressor to make a track sound squashed or dead. Now let's build on the foundation. Once you've adjusted and processed the drum tracks, the suggestion then would be to continue with the rest of the rhythmic tracks individually or in context. This includes, but are not limited to, additional percussion tracks, bass tracks, guitar tracks, and keyboard tracks. Another method Once you have a working version of the drum tracks, would be to move directly to the vocal tracks, starting with the lead vocal. For some, this may provide a more in-depth way to make musical decisions for the rest of the tracks as they are slowly added back into the mix. With this, you constantly work back and forth, making adjustments in solo mode and in context with other tracks. This includes making adjustments to specific small sections of related tracks along with the entire arrangement in its current state. Now, you may come to a point in the process where you may have an issue making a certain track or tracks work in the mix. In some cases, burying a track can create a problem, especially if you're not working alone. Because when you initially created your track sheet, any issues should have been identified and handled. Nevertheless, we know this can still happen. A solution would be to create two versions of the mix, one with the problem track and one without it. This should help significantly with the final decision to keep or remove the offending track. Keep in mind that sometimes an offending track can turn out to be a surprise that actually makes a song that much better. Well, my friends, that's a wrap. If you like this presentation, please give it the thumbs up and click the subscribe button on your screen now and join our group. We have new presentations coming out every 7 to 14 days, and we would love to have you be a part of our team. Also, leave a comment in the comments section. Let us know what you think about this presentation, and check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Spotify. While you're here, listen to some of the other music and check out some of the other videos, especially the playlists, because they're designed just for you. Thank you so much for stopping by. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you soon.